So I want to talk about the therapeutic and spiritual concepts of self-love and self-compassion. They smell to me. They smell of emotional repression. And frankly, I don't put a lot of stock in what therapists or spiritual teachers even say anymore, because I know so much of the therapeutic and spiritual paradigms have been built on the back of emotional repression. Side note, if you're hearing a lot of concepts from your therapist or spiritual teacher, like, attachment disorder, CPTSD, awareness, awakening, and they're not talking about buried emotions in the body, run. Let that be a red flag of emotional repression, right? I've worked with a number of therapists and spiritual teachers who didn't even know that they were couching their emotional repression in therapeutic and spiritual sounding philosophies and hiding in their own particular paradigm. And that can really throw people off track, right? So anyways, that's my public service announcement. So why do the ideas of self-love and self-compassion smell to me? Well, for one, most of us are programmed to hate and reject ourselves already. That's what emotional repression is at the end of the day. It's the mechanism of self-hatred and self-rejection. And it's really unconscious, really powerful, and really autonomous, which means it's running on its own. So on a conscious level, to try to cultivate self-love and self-compassion when down below in the unconscious body, there's a turbocharged V8 engine of repression, self-hatred, and self-rejection, seems both counterproductive and, a bit like we're fooling ourselves. When I work with people who are in emotional repression and claim to want to love themselves, what I usually say to them first is, no, you don't. You really don't. You want to hate, reject, and repress yourself, right? As evidenced by the fact that that's what's already happening in your system. Second, if you do want to take a loving action towards yourself, then let's make that self-hatred mechanism really conscious, right? So loving yourself would be to consciously hate yourself. Until that self-hatred and self-repression mechanism runs out of steam, right? And what you'll find is underneath that, you already are love and compassion. That's like your innate being. You don't need to cultivate something that you already are. Yeah, and if you're trying to cultivate self-love and self-compassion, ironically, that's actually a form of self-hatred and self-rejection, because you're trying to change yourself instead of just making the unconscious conscious. So if you want to love yourself, bring that self-hatred, self-rejection, and self-repression mechanism up into conscious awareness and let it run its course, right? Like most forms of repression programming and suffering, when it's unconscious, it's in control of us. But when we make it conscious, then we're the boss again. So let cultivate or cultivation be a watchword and another red flag of emotional repression. Imagine trying to cultivate aliveness, yeah? It's like, I'm already alive. To cultivate it would be pretense, and that's exactly the point. When we bury what's true, childhood emotions, we're forced to identify with what's false. In this case, loving, compassionate, spiritual, well-adjusted people. I did this for my entire 30s, so it's just a heads up. And here is what's really cool. As we start to come out of emotional repression and can be ourselves again, not only is there a recognition that we don't really need spirituality or therapy anymore, but that both paradigms were built by people who were in repression, right? People who were trying to cultivate love and compassion. And so all of the terms and disorders and diagnoses and solutions, they start to sound just sort of weird and fake, because you know that the man behind the curtain is the mechanism of emotional repression. And if there's one thing that people in emotional repression can't do, it's help other people out of emotional repression. The best they can do is theorize, diagnose, prescribe, hold space, and teach us how to manage our repression-driven suffering, right? Because that's what they're doing. And so this is why we developed the Killer Bee inquiries, right? Because we don't want to teach you how to manage your suffering. We want to teach you how to come out of emotional repression and end it. If you'd like to learn more, visit repressiontest.com.